Now we got it down to where I'm literally putting in about 5 days a month with my law firm, yet we're still maintaining our top and bottom line numbers.
Welcome to the Law Firm Growth Podcast, where we share the latest tips, tactics, and strategies for scaling your practice from the top experts in the world of growing law firms. Are you ready to take your practice to the next level? Let's get started.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Case Fuel Podcast. This is your host, Jan Roos, and we're interviewing the Law Firm Top 500. I'm here with Todd Villarubia of Louisiana Wealth Plan, and Todd posted some really impressive growth last year, 43%, and we're going to talk to him today about how he was able to accomplish that. So thanks for being on the show, Todd.
Hey, thank you, Jan. I appreciate the invite.
All right. So getting started. So we kind of have a high-level view of what you do today, Todd, but would you mind telling us a little bit of the origin story about how you got to where you are today?
I'd always been entrepreneurial, and after I got my law degree, I went and got my master's of tax law, went and worked for a local New Orleans-based law firm. And after a couple of years, just realized that I just frankly wasn't cut out for that. So I started my own firm. And at first it was just me. My first year, I'll never forget, I grossed $19,000. That was top line revenue. And, but I was dirt poor and didn't know any better. And it was a start. And every year for, I believe, I don't know, good Lord, probably 18 straight years, we had both top line and bottom line growth. So it's definitely been an evolution. There is no easy magic pill. I think anybody that tells you differently is, just lying to you. But I do think that there are ways to take quantum leaps to grow your firm.
So that's really interesting, Todd. So as far as kind of the big moves that have happened, can you think about any of the big inflection points along your path that led to those quantum leaps?
Frankly, there's three things I guess I would point to. The first is hiring my first full-time employee. If you're familiar with the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, he talks about, the problem, you really don't own a business when you're just a solo. I mean, you really are just self-employed, even if you may have an S Corp or an LLC. And it's always, I think, a big jump for somebody to hire that first employee because it's a little terrifying, I think, like I said, we wound up doubling our top line revenue for several years. With that first year, like I said, I think we did 17 or 19,000. Next year we were right under 40, and then the next year we're right under 80. And I think it was by that third year that I said, you know what, me taking out the garbage and writing up all my own stuff, I need to hire somebody, but it was pretty terrifying because, you start looking at, well, if I pay somebody back then, I've been in this for 23 years, you could get a decent, employee for, 40 grand or so. They could do a little bit of everything. That was a big chunk, but what it come to realize pretty quickly is that, wow, once I get that person to be doing stuff that I was doing that I don't really need to be doing as a lawyer, I don't need to be answering the phones. I don't need to be handling my books. I don't need to be necessarily even doing drafting. It's a way to then leverage your time, which really started then growing my business pretty rapidly, So that was, I think, the first inflection point. The second inflection point was making the move to not only get, paralegals, but then ultimately to get another tax attorney. And frankly, I wouldn't have had the guts to do that. I'd been at one point in private practice for maybe 10 years or so. I was recruited to head up the estate and business planning section for the largest firm in my area. And I decided to go because I knew I already had my own book of business. The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out and I go back out on my own. And I guess that's a side note for everybody that's listening. Until you know how to rainmake, I think it will always be under someone's thumb. I would submit people that it is actually more important for you to learn how to generate revenue than even being a great technical lawyer. You can always hire better technicians. And if you don't think there's somebody that's a better technician than you, then I think you're being a little foolish and a little, maybe need to be humbled. I am not the brightest tax attorney in the world, but I think I know how business owners think. And I think that helps me to help them get to a better place. So, for me, that was another big jump when I went to that big law firm, was hiring the first LLM that worked for me. And I was like, my goodness, how are we going to do this? If I think at the time we were up to maybe 360,000, just back in maybe 2002 or so. We were doing like high 300s, I think, at that point. And I was terrified. This guy was going to cost like 120 grand. And I'm like, how in the hell are we going to afford this, And lo and behold, we wound up, the firm says, look, you don't worry about that. What do you think you can fill them up with? I said, I don't know. I guess I can fill up a third of the time. That's just a rough guess. Well, within 2 months, I had him 100% full, because what happens is as you give that work to a competent person, it then again frees you up to even give better service to your best customers, go out there, look at your referral sources and really treat them well. So that was a second kind of big, thing. Within 3 years of that, 2-3 years of that, we jumped from high 300s to like mid 600s of top line revenue. And then really the last piece, which really started about 5 years ago, was when I finally, in my stupidity, finally came to realize that, the very best apps have coaches. There's a lot of CEOs that have coaches. Why in the world would I not have coaches? And I had heard about this guy, Patrick Wilson, with Atticus, which is one of the larger practice management groups out there that are devoted to lawyers. And that really became my entrepreneurial launching pad, because, he was the one who introduced me to eMyth, which is all about getting written systems and processes in place. And he helped me understand, time management, time blocks that we implemented in our firm. He helped us understand the 80-20 rule that most people don't know about, and how 80% of your revenue will often come 20% of your files. And actually, it's called the Pareto principle. I mean, I really owe a lot of success. It's like they say, you kind of stand on the shoulders of others. And that was really the coaching, I think, was the third piece. And, after I felt like I learned a lot from him, I wanted to eventually move into a group called How to Manage a Small Law Firm with Arjan Robin. And Arjan is just brilliant. And they kind of talk in terms of like 7 different working parts of every law firm, but it's also for every business. And I've gotten much clearer now on what kind of financial reporting I should be doing, how to market better, how to sell better. He was the one who kind of explained very simply to me that all of sales, for example, is really, it's something we do for someone, not to someone. And I think that's a huge mindset shift for a lot of people. They think of sales being an awful thing, but the reality is that the clients that come into my office are facing some pretty treacherous issues, facing their own mortality, facing what happens if I get divorced, facing what happens with my disabled child. They're facing, what happens if I become disabled. They've got estate tax issues. They've got what happens if my kids get divorced or lawsuits, all of these major issues. So are we selling, to them, or are we selling for them when we're experts in this area? I would submit that we're selling for them. And all we're doing is we're helping them. All sales is about movement. They are currently in a spot that they have pain about, and we're going to help them get to a higher level and, to where they want to be. So all of a sudden, I sleep well at night because I know if I die, I've got enough insurance to make sure my wife is protected. I know if I die that my kids aren't going to waste this money at age 18 as we set up testamentary trust. I know if I die, I no longer have $10 million estate tax problem that I used to have. So we can address all those to get the clients to where they be so that they stop worrying about all this, because ultimately everybody worries about death and disability and divorce and all these things. There's a reason they call it the 3Ds, and we help people do that. And I would submit that everybody on call, regardless of proprietary, has the same thing. And that's a whole nother thing. I don't tell people, people say, what do you do, Todd? Well, I don't say I'm a tax attorney. I don't say, well, I'm a board certified expert in estate planning. I don't say, I was recognized as one of the top 100 attorneys by Worth magazine in the entire country. What I say is we help highly successful business owners protect their life's work from the government, creditors, and tax, because they don't give a shit, frankly, about me. They care about them. So, by defining who I help, highly successful business owners, what do I help them with? Protecting their life's work, which is basically everything that they've saved and built. And what am I protecting them from? Some of the biggest threats that are out there: taxes, the government, and lawsuits and creditors, right? So, I tell you, when I tell people that, some people refer to it as a magic statement, whatever, it immediately resonates with them. And that's, again, I learned that through good coaching. So the third real, taking off point for me was the coaching that I've gotten through the last 5 or 6 years have just taken us to a whole new level.
Yeah, Todd, well, that's a lot of awesome stuff, and we got a lot to dig into there. But that was actually my next question. And, the whole point of differentiating a law practice is something that a lot of people are afraid to do. And you'll see a lot of solos get stuck in sort of the general practice mode because they're afraid to turn away work, especially when they have those, those hungry, leaner times what a lot of us face when we're starting out. To that magic statement point, I couldn't agree more, because it's the kind of thing that's going to sound really, really good to the clients that you want to deal with. And it's not going to sound good to the people you don't want to deal with. But at the end of the day, you're saving yourself time and being able to to find work for the attorneys that you've trained in the stuff that you guys are really good at. And you're also doing them a favor to your previous point about, getting the wholesales and really kind of coming from the service mentality. If you guys have developed this deep expertise in Louisiana tax law and estate law, then, you'd be doing them a disservice if it wasn't for the fact that they would hire you.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example there. One of the, I know one of the questions you want to talk with me about is some of the trends I'm seeing and what I'm seeing in estate law. When I first started 23 years ago, so much of this was driven by death taxes. The exemption was $600,000, and people didn't realize, for example, that, the death benefit of an insurance policy was factored in. So, I could have back then $1 million term policy with no cash value and have an estate tax problem. And a lot of attorneys didn't understand that. A lot of clients didn't understand it. But my point was that if you owned a business and had a house, you probably had an estate tax problem, right? And so there were so many people that were being driven by tax reasons. And even when the exemption went from 600 to $1 million and then to $2 million, $3.5 million, there were still a lot of people. Well, now it's up to $11 million. So what I'm finding is you have what I would almost call a commoditization of an estate planning practice. And what people are doing is that they've got people advertising newspapers everywhere and on radio. I heard one guy literally on Groupon the other day saying, we'll do a will for $75.
Oh, geez.
Well, yeah, and our take on that is, what? If price is your number one goal and not quality, then there are many, and I truly mean this, there are many attorneys me and my team can refer you to who are less qualified and less competent, but who will absolutely do it for cheaper. And if that's all you want, then you know what? We're not the firm for you. And, it all gets down to it. If you ever I'd highly encourage those of you that haven't heard of this, go to TED.com, look at Simon Sinek's Why. It's a 15-minute program that literally changed how I communicate. I literally have to watch, and that blew up this whole detailed website I had. And instead of talking about, well, we do wills, we do trusts, we do family limited partnerships, we do private foundations, all the what, I started talking about what we believe in. We believe that you should decide where your assets go without the government taking 40%. We believe you should decide, who's going to raise your children if you unfortunately die too young, not some judge that you've never met. We believe that you should protect your kids from, the threats that are out there with divorce and creditors. And boy, I tell you, it's a whole different way of communicating because it gets to the why we do what we do. And you're right. I mean, at that point, most of my business owner clients, it's like it immediately catches with them. That's why our close rate is so high. We track all of this stuff. But I can tell you, we had one client that I'll never forget. They came in. I started talking about how we could eliminate about $10 million of death taxes. And the financial advisor pulls me outside and she says, Todd, you may want to ease up on this talk about trying to take the government out of the equation with, $10 million. And I'm like, because the clients are liberal, she said, I said, you know what, that's fine. But, I don't think I'm the right attorney, and they were going to arguably pay us a big fee. But I was like, if we aren't on the same level here and we're not doing it for the same reasons, I don't know if I'm your guy. You want to go write a big check to the government? Great. That's just not who I am, and there's other people, there's other ways you can write checks to the government, but, I'm just not your guy. So, yeah, I think when you develop your magic statement, it's really well done. And I think when it immediately connects with people. I think when you get real clear what niche you are in, and the best example I can tell you there, Jan, is, in How to Manage a Small Law Firm, there's one of the most successful firms there, a guy by the name of Eric Broll. And Eric, I'll never forget the first time I met with him, I'm like, so you're an estate planner, Eric, how did you build this, $1 million plus law firm? I want to learn from, of course. And he says, well, first of all, I wouldn't really call myself an estate planner. I said, well, I thought you did successions. He says, yes, we do, but I don't really do estate planning. I said, wait, you don't do wills? He said, no. I said, you don't do LLCs? No. I said, so you're telling me like somebody comes in for a succession and you know that they need to do a will, you don't do that? He said, no. And that's a great example of how people get nervous about going niche. But here's a guy that because only did succession, everybody in his city, everybody in the surrounding area, all the attorneys, even estate planning attorneys, they know when you have a succession, he's one of the top guys. So it's almost like a niche within a niche, if you think about it. I'm kind of doing the same thing, frankly, where our firm is really starting to gravitate towards a national presence and really just going after, two main practice areas. One, for those clients that do have estate tax problems. In other words, people that are above the $20 million limit, because we can, through a bunch of, tools that we have, I can make $200 million literally disappear from death taxes forever, multiple generations, right? And then the second practice area we're doing is with asset protection, which as you grow your wealth becomes a major issue. So we feel like both of those are national type issues. So more and more now we're starting to get a national reputation and starting to really focus in on that. that, and I know it's going to sound weird as an estate planner, but I'm literally looking to, fairly soon get out of doing wills altogether, buy-sell agreements, LLCs, and referring that to people, because the other people that do wills and stuff, there's a lot of estate planners with wills and living trusts that have no idea how to set up a dynasty trust properly, or family limited partnerships, some of the high-end stuff we do, and they'll arguably refer work to me if I refer, some of the base work to them. So it winds up working for everybody, I think, when you become niche. I mean, think about the whole world. When I'm 51, and when I was a kid, there was only 3 stations on the TV. I'm not even going to get into that. There was no remote back then, but now we've got 1,000 stations on satellite. I used to DJ, so I used to haul around all these albums. And if I wanted to switch from one song to another, I had to put a whole nother album on. Now with my phone, I can literally have an entire DJ set up with 2 iPhones, or 2 iPods, and play the exact beats per minute. I don't have to lug all those things around. It's a long tail. There's a book on this that deals with how we're becoming hyper specialized and very niche. And I think the sooner attorneys start grasping that, it's no different. If I had a heart attack, which unfortunately I did a few years ago.
Oh, geez.
I wouldn't go to a podiatrist, right? I mean, I'm going to go to the best cardiologist I find in the world, which I did in Cleveland Clinic. So it's the same thing. And I think the sooner lawyers grasp that, I think the better off everybody's going to be. And I think it's important to be a specialist. I really do. I think the fact, for example, that I have an LLM and tax really makes a big difference. I mean, with these people, there's a lot of people who are estate planners that don't have that tax specialty that really, they're missing out on some benefits, and the clients are missing out is really the sad part. So I do think getting hyper niche is a real path to growth, but you have to be willing to cut off, the C and D type cases. And that might be because you don't like the person or they're not going to pay you. Each person has to find what a C and D is. For us, for example, we have now twice started to go down the Medicaid route, like a lot of estate planners are with the increased exemption. And quite honestly, we just couldn't do it well. And for the first time in my career, I faced a practice that area that I've tried twice now. And I just said, you know what? We got to stop doing this. Let's refer all of the Medicaid long-term, nursing home care type work to other highly qualified attorneys. And in turn, that's all they do. When they've got a client that has an estate tax or is worried about asset protection, hopefully they'll think of us.
It's actually interesting because, as far as the referrals come in, that's definitely a really good way to build sources. But, the other thing too, to people who might be listening to it, that guy that you mentioned, that poor sucker who was offering the $75 Worlds on Groupon, he probably has to do a half an hour consultation or an hour consultation with everyone that he's doing for that. And when you have, that half an hour, there's only so many hours in the week that you can have. And, when you're sitting down with somebody like that versus somebody who stands to lose $20 million from the death tax, you're obviously going to be getting a better billable for that. So, it's super important. And I kind of wanted to dig in a little bit on that, Todd. So, we have this issue with commoditization, kind of switching a little bit into the tactical stuff, how you're getting these higher net worth individuals into the door.
I've always viewed that as being kind of a combination of 3 different things. And those 3 things I would submit are experience, expertise, and your systems and people. That's kind of the third thing. So when I say experience, I've had attorneys that have, worked for me that frankly have never filed a 706, which is like the federal estate tax or gift tax return, 709. And even though they've been estate planners their whole life, So I think having the experience of over 2 decades of working with people, it lends a certain comfort level to both the client and the advisor that we're a known quantity. They're unfortunately, what I found in particular in estate planning is that there's a lot of litigators that hate litigation, and they finally say, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go get a more genteel practice. I'm going to become an estate planner. And I literally had a conversation not even a year ago with a person, I will spare them because, excuse my French, I tend to curse a lot, but, I truly want to strangle her. I mean, she said she was an estate planner. She was a former litigator. I mentioned something about just like a testamentary trust, which, all I can tell the people who don't know what that is, it's kind of like estate planning basic 101, right? And she didn't know what that was. And I was like, how dare you? How dare you call yourself an estate planner when you don't even know the most basic stuff? And you're going to advertise to the public that you're an estate planner and you don't even know the basics. You're going to harm someone. It's the same thing with a lot of estate planners, in my opinion, who go around selling the living trust. In certain states, living trust makes sense. In other states, not so much. And there's a wide debate among the estate planning community. And I've always viewed it as, look, you do whichever you feel in your good conscience is right for the client and your professional opinion. But if you're going to do the damn living trust, then make sure you fund it. And if you got to tell the client that he's got to pay you more money so that it's effectuated, go do it. But I can tell you, in my 23 years, I've literally seen hundreds and hundreds of these living trusts that aren't funded, sometimes not at all. So all these promises that they made the client are actually a lie. And I believe it should be grounds for malpractice personally. And so it's stuff like that where I really think that the experience comes into play. I think the expertise comes into play. So obviously somebody who's been doing nothing but estate and asset protection and business and tax law their whole career for 2 decades is always going to know more than somebody who just switched over a year ago, right? I mean, they haven't been through the rodeos we have, and then finally it's your system. So, starting with reading the E-Myth and then continuing on with, we actually hired a fractional COO at our firm, and we started developing literally written processes, policies, procedures, checklists, systems for everything we do at the firm. This is how we answer the phone. We developed what we call SKUs, which is like step-by-step instructions, who needs to do what and what our costs are to produce a given line of business, right? And we literally started putting all of this stuff in writing. Why? Because once you start hiring, we quickly learn that it's wonderful until they walk out. And then when they walk out, all hell breaks loose because all that institutional knowledge leaves. I remember my first full-time employee, when she left, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to handle this? Because she knew all my clients. She knew all of my key advisors. She knew advisors were horrible and which ones were good. She knew how to run my books. She knew what all my passwords were. And she leaves. Before we had written systems, that was a nightmare, right? And as other people left, same kind of problem. And it wasn't until we started developing written systems. And now when we hire somebody, we're like, okay, for your position, here's the stuff you need to generally know about the firm. And for your position, here's the stuff you need to know for your position. And we have videos, we have written systems. We have a 900-page ops manual so that, the whole idea is the systems run our business and our people run our systems. And that really, like I said, was kind of with the coaching that we got kind of the third quantum leap that we took as a firm.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, Todd. So, this is something that a lot of people, I'm sure this sounds like, the heaven scenario for a lot of people, having the actual numbers that are running in their system and being able to track that stuff. I would bet if you pulled 100 law firms, you might find one or two that actually know what their profit margin and on given service is. And, that obviously informs what you guys want to do moving forward. You'd spoken about working in the Medicaid division. I'm sure some part of the decision not to move forward with that was based on the numbers that ended up coming from that. You're obviously moving up to higher and higher levels of managing this stuff as you build your team to take care of kind of the lower level stuff. Now, as far as what you're concerned with, what are the key metrics that you look at when you're determining whether the firm's moving in the right direction or not?
We start developing key performance indicators. And the idea was that it was based on some stuff I learned through Entrepreneurs Organization and a guy by the name of Vern Harnish, who wrote a wonderful book, Secrets of the Rockefeller Habits. That's all about strategic planning, which we do. And I learned a lot about KPIs, from him, and then subsequently read other books and so forth. And one of the things we started doing was literally trying to track, 2 KPIs per, I guess the best way to put this would be 2 KPIs per section of my firm. So what I mean by that, 2 KPIs for marketing, 2 KPIs for sales, 2 KPIs for our production or factory, 2 KPIs for finance, 2 KPIs for the CEO, me, my mindset, 2 KPIs for our physical plant. And literally the whole idea is we then assign people on my team to each one of those divisions, if you will. And then we had a very clear picture of what we were looking at. So as a simple example on marketing, we knew that for many years we averaged about 12 new files per month of at least initial conferences, I guess I should say. So we knew that that was one of the marketing metrics that we had to track. How many initial conferences do we have per month? And then secondly, again, going back to that Pareto principle that 80% of the benefit comes from 20% of the effort. That was, again, Patrick Wilson from Atticus taught me that. And I went back and looked at our file and I said, let's look at the top 20 files as far as revenue generation. Sure enough, 20% of my files generated a little bit over 80% of my revenue. So what we started saying is that we call them 10K plus files, and we even got clear on which types of our files generated at least $10,000 of fees. And on average of those 12, we had 3, initial conferences whereby it was a potential $10,000 plus file on average per month. So from a marketing standpoint, those were our 2 KPIs. And the whole idea was, okay, what do we need to do to meet both of those? Well, sometimes we need to follow up because somebody cancels. Sometimes it means, that really need to push these guys that are potentially larger cases because you have to distinguish, when trying to sell. Are we going to spend 100 hours trying trying to get somebody in for a nominal will, maybe not. But will we spend a bunch of time trying to get somebody back in on an $80,000 succession, that's very complicated, maybe litigated? Yeah, I mean, we should. So we start developing the KPIs and then developing some simple dashboards, frankly, where I can run the practice based on those metrics and assigning people to each of those so I knew who was in charge of what. And between that and the written systems, believe it or not, I'm actually only meeting with clients like 3 days a month now. And I've got 2 other businesses I'm involved with. One that is working with the same exact clients, but instead of doing law, we're doing pretty much everything else for them. So again, highly successful business owners. It's called Fountainhead Global. And with Fountainhead Global, we're doing not law, but pretty much everything else, where we're helping them with tax mitigation and family governance, mission, vision, values, and proactive planning and all this other stuff. The ability to run my law firm on systems so that I don't have to be working. I literally went from when I was, a few years ago, working 60 hours a week to once those systems started getting developing, I no longer was working until midnight every Wednesday and on the weekends. Then I eventually I was taking every Friday off. Last year, for the first time, I started taking 1 week off from the law firm every single month and a second week once per quarter per month. So in other words, 1 out of every 3 months, I was taking off 2 weeks, and on the other months, I was taking off 1 week. Now we got it down to where I'm literally putting in about 5 days a month with my law firm, yet we're still maintaining our top and bottom line numbers because we're so systematized now. The law firm is not as dependent upon me, and I would submit to y'all, it's not just about my time. It's about that I was putting and all of you who are listening, you're putting your clients at risk by you not having a system. Because if you go down, disability, death, I mean, my own father, a stroke was a quadriplegic at 47. If you go down, all of your clients are going to suffer if they're so dependent upon you. Your poor employees who are depending upon you for their salaries so that they can send their kids to better schools and so that they can afford better homes, you're literally screwing them all. You are literally screwing them all by not having written systems. You're literally screwing them all by not pricing correctly, because when you price correctly, you can build in extra profits, which you can then reinvest into learning and growing your systems and into learning, become a better technician and a better entrepreneur and a better manager, all those things, right? And when you undercut, race to the bottom, we've seen what happens with that in China, right? I mean, everybody knows, unfortunately, that, if it's made in China nowadays, it's probably going to be kind of crap. Well, why is that? It's because they're trying to do everything on the cheap, right? So why is it any different with the law firms? So I would just submit that there's a whole different way to look at this. And look, we lose some business because people say, oh, Villarubia, it's too expensive. And I always say, well, relative to what? If I charge you 50 grand more than the next guy, but I save 200 grand on something he had no idea about, it doesn't have my experience or expertise, which one is better for the client?
Absolutely. This is something that's really tough, especially when people are starting out. The transition to getting to the point where you have the confidence to do that is obviously something that takes time. But no, I couldn't agree more. And it's like, going back to that poor guy who does all the stuff on Groupon, it's really going to be tough for him to ever scale a business and get himself out of it because he's never going to have the margin to hire people. And that's, kind of the engine for a lot of this growth. Speaking about that a little bit, I knew you were running a tight ship, Todd, but I didn't realize it was tight to the point that you're only spending a handful of days of the month working on the actual law firm, which is fantastic. And if anyone finds this something appealing, I would definitely recommend re-listening to this episode to see how Todd was speaking about how to get there. But obviously something that has to happen when you can take that kind of step back from the firm is hiring good people. So I kind of wanted to ask you, obviously the systems are a very important part, but can I ask you about sort of your philosophies around hiring and how you've gotten such good people around you to help you run this firm?
Being an entrepreneur's organization, and I was also in Vistage for a while, and just the nature of my practice, right? I mean, I'm primarily, again, working with highly successful business owners. You start to learn a couple of things, and as I regularly point out people, there's 2 things I know about just about every business owner, whether you're a small lawyer, small firm lawyer, or whether you're a CEO of a $50 million widget company. There's 2 things I find pretty regularly. Number one is that the single biggest source of pain for the owner is almost always HR. And I'm clear about why that. And number 2 is that the biggest thing holding every single person back that's a business owner is that in the world of knowledge, there's a small piece of stuff that we know, and there's certainly a small piece of stuff that we know that we don't know. But the much bigger piece of the pie of knowledge is all about stuff that we don't even know that we don't know. So, before I didn't know about Vern Harnish and Secrets of the Rockefeller House. I didn't know about Michael Gerber. I didn't even know about stuff. So I wasn't even aware that I wasn't aware that it wasn't, that this stuff existed. And then all of a sudden you learn it and you're like, wow, how can I now apply it? How can I execute execute on it. And we started developing things to then not only learn, but to grow and execute on it, right? So for me, it focuses, with the you don't have a business until you have employees. And unfortunately, many of us, it's a huge pain point. And the reason is, frankly, is that if you think about HR, it's nothing but headaches of the owner, right? I mean, by and large, I'm talking, I can remember I spent months with one of my employees, my right hand at the time, trying to figure out what an exempt employee was and what a non-exempt employee was under the employment laws, right? And it was frankly just very aggravating is a nice way to put it, because we spent all this time trying to figure out what the rules were, what we could and couldn't do. And guess what? We ain't making any money. We're not helping anybody, right? All we're doing is we're trying to comply with damn government's regulations. And I get why they're there. But, HR problems, whether it's because somebody's out sick, and we're dealing with this today where a good part of my team, including myself, isn't in Friday. So I had to, figure out a way to get, somebody to answer the phones because so many people are out on vacation and everything. So I would recommend that there's a bunch of resources out there. So, there's John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership. I do believe that building an A team is incredibly important to your success. Apple doesn't become Apple without really brilliant people. It's not just jobs and laws, right? And I've been blessed that, quite frankly, we've gotten better and better on how to hire, how to filter out the bad bad resumes. So, for example, one of the things that I learned from our John at How to Manage was, stop running ads that say, oh, please, won't you come work for me? We're so great. You're going to love working with us. Instead, it's just the opposite. We're like, if you are going to show up late for work, do not apply for this job. If you're going to sit around gossiping about, wasting half the day instead of helping our clients, complaining about your spouse, don't apply for this job. If you aren't going to be good with details, please don't apply for this job, because we need people that are good with this. And it's all the stuff about what we don't want. And it's this ridiculously long ad. And we then ask them to do 2 simple things. Number 1, make sure that you attach your resume in a PDF format that has been cleaned of all of the metadata. And number 2 is please, in your email response, I'm a big Ayn Rand fan, so I'll use one of the Ayn Rand characters, put Howard Roark in the subject line. And I then tell my staff, we create a special, email, info at, whatever. And I tell my staff person who reviews the resumes, if they don't have Howard Roark in the email, I don't care how experienced they are, how wonderful they are, whatever. If they can't follow that one instruction, do not even look at it. Immediately put it in trash. And that literally, believe it or not, wipes out about 75% of the response. Now, we've had some people say, they've cursed us out for doing that. Why are you doing this? Who do you think you are? I'm like, well, I'm somebody that cares about my clients, and I'm somebody that's going to pay you higher than scale. And maybe the reason you don't have a job right now is because you think this is ridiculous.
That's a great filter for the attention to detail. Because, God forbid, if they're not going to do this on something that's contingent on them getting a job, who would say what's going to happen on some random Tuesday 6 months into hiring them when they miss a detail on something that could be really consequential when somebody ends up passing away?
Amen, brother.
Yeah, man. That's really awesome. And look, I'll say this, Todd. I got some books from that I'll absolutely be checking out myself. This has been a really, really good source of stuff for management for any company, to be frank. We've got some awesome growth that's happened to this. You've obviously carved out quite an awesome lifestyle for yourself. What's next for Louisiana Wealth Plan?
Wealthplan Law Group is the name of the firm. LA Wealthplan is the website. But again, what I'm envisioning, in fact, we're getting ready to host the first event. I haven't even figured out how to market it yet. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring some of the nation's top experts in to specifically talk about strategies that really make sense for the high net worth community that don't really make a lot of sense for the middle or even upper middle class. So we got Bob Keebler coming in. We have, we got to secure all this, but we've been in discussions. He's agreed to come. He's one of the nation's top, CPAs, and he's going to be talking about all the beautiful things we can do under Trump's new tax law. I've got Doug Lodmill coming in, who's one of the nation's, experts on asset protection planning. I'm going to be speaking on, family limited partnerships and why dynasty trust makes so much sense. And the whole idea is, frankly, between that event and then I'm going to start speaking to EO groups, hopefully around the country and eventually around the world, about how the needs of people. So a lot of people don't realize, believe it or not, not, only 4% of businesses in all of the world do $1 million or more of revenue. And people don't realize how elite they are when they reach that level. And in EO, to be a member, you have to own your business and you have to do at least $1 million. So there are needs that are unique for somebody. There are things we do for people that are, in the high income or high net worth area that really it wouldn't make sense for somebody making $100,000 to do. And look, I'm not trying to disparage the people that are frankly, if you're making $100,000, you're way above middle class. I mean, the average household in America only makes $50,000, believe it or not. And that's who I come from, by the way. Not even that. I mean, my dad dropped out of high school. My mom just did high school. I think I was the first person to go to college, much less law school. So it's not because I'm an elitist. It's just that, I believe that business owners are the fountainhead of human progress. That's why I love Ayn Rand so much. I mean, we now with the iPhone have more, knowledge and power than a king had 20 years ago. I mean, really think about that. It has democratized knowledge and information, and it's all because of the employees. That is who Apple is, employees. And it's also because of the bravery and the risk that Jobs and Woz took, with this brilliant idea that they had, right? So I honor them. And business owners in my book are heroes. And the whole idea is that I can only spend so much time helping people. I'd love to help all the people who have Medicaid problems. They really do. I'm awful. My own aunt got stuck in it, and she spent over $1 million on her long-term care. And I think it's awful, that somebody, I think as a country, we should take care of those who can't help themselves. But because my time is finite, I choose to work with kind of the highly, highly successful business owners. And that's where I'm looking to do, is really kind of start expanding it nationally, because the clients that need my help with Wealth Planning Law Group, frankly, also need Fountainhead Global, my other company, to do all the other non-legal, non-law related stuff. So that's where I'm looking to, is really, if anybody's listening, of course, as a fellow lawyer, we can split fees and stuff like that. But if y'all have anything, obviously we're always interested, for the high net worth clients, I'll fly anywhere. I love to travel anyway. So that's kind of what I'm looking to do. I love to travel. So if I can combine speaking with, meeting with high net worth clients that are business owners for both of my companies, then that's kind of where we're looking to go.
Yeah. And that actually gives us a great segue into the next question, Todd, which is, what's the best place to find you online?
Either www.LA Wealth Plan. It's not law wealth plan. Some people get confused. LA for Louisiana Wealth Plan. We had this idea for a while that we were literally, much like Edward Jones, going to build out a high-end estate planning practice throughout the country. That was our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal. And then, Fountainhead came along. It's such a bigger opportunity that I had to kind of put that first dream kind of on the side, and kind of go build out Fountainhead. So that's one way on the legal side. It's kind of like what's called a family office, but very different on the Fountainhead side. It's just fountainheadglobal.com. Once again, there we've got referral fees that we can pay even non-attorneys on Fountainhead side, because we're not doing legal work. It's all about helping people grow and maximize their business, family, and personal lives with Fountainhead. So we've got VIP healthcare and family governance and growth strategies for the business, HR solutions for all those problems. And it's something that's a higher calling even than my own law firm. So please feel free, reach out to me. My direct email address is Todd at or LA Wealth Plan or Todd at fountainheadglobal.com. Feel free. I've gotten real clear. The more people I help, the better my life becomes. So I'm sincerely say this. If I can help anybody that's listening to this, don't hesitate to reach out to me. It might take a little time for me to get back with you, but I've gotten real clear that the more people I help and the more deeply I help them, the better my life becomes. So I'm committed to help and serve other people.
Well, thank you so much for that, Todd. That's super generous of you to offer. And anyone who's listening to this podcast, for one, thank you so much for all of the detail that you've given in scaling this practice and really getting to what most people would consider a dream outcome as far as where this is going to go when somebody ends up striking out to form their own law firm. And again, I would definitely encourage anyone who has heard what kind of stuff Todd's been up to and wants that for their own life to definitely re-listen to that. Check out some of those books that he's mentioned. I think this has been a super valuable podcast. So thanks again, Todd. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jan. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So this is another episode of the Case School podcast, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Growth Podcast. For show notes, free resources, and more, head on over to casefuel.com/podcast. Looking forward to catching up on the next episode.